Despite recent gains in economic growth, many families in Massachusetts remain in poverty, and one of the highest concentrations of poverty can be found here in Boston. Over the past couple of months, people from anti-poverty agencies have been trying to rally behind an agenda to help more families become self-sufficient. A roadmap for that agenda was outlined in a report by the Mass Budget and Policy Center that was commissioned by the Mass Association for Community Action, or MASSCAP. We'd like to welcome its executive director, Joe Diamond. Thank you much for being with us, Joe.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So what about the situation in Boston? I mean, in terms of percentages at least, how many families or children are living at least some degree of poverty?
Well, close to half of the children in the city are living in close to poverty or in poverty. This really is a reflection of what we're seeing across the state. It does vary. The report found that about 1 in 7 children across the state, when you look at every part of the state, are living in poverty. And that is sort of a shocking figure. What we're saying and what we point out in the report, and as we've learned through these sessions, is that this has to do with children. Children are parts of families. We work with so many working families. In fact, over half of the people that we work with, half of the families that we work with, are working. And so it's not really an issue of people not trying. It's really an issue of wages and other challenges and obstacles that people are facing. The report itself, as you mentioned, prepared by Mass Budget with us, is actually the third in a series of reports we've done over the past 20 years with Mass Budget, and it finds that the poverty rate in Massachusetts has been about 10.5% for a number of years, over 2 decades, in fact. And so while we've made some inroads, in fact, we made inroads early in the fight on poverty. Through the 1970s, poverty dropped significantly. But then the drop in poverty seemed to level off, and that has to do, in part, with the fact that wages stagnated. And that's one of the structural barriers that we found in this report. In fact, one of the major findings in the report is that there's a structural barrier to folks who are making low income or middle income. Their wages have stagnated since the mid-1970s. Wages for upper income folks have actually done very well. And so there's large inequality in the state. The good news is that the services that community action agencies provide, and this was also something that the report discusses, our programs and programs like the ones that we provide and other allies provide, help over 900,000 people in the state leave poverty. That's incredibly important to know because it shows that the programs that we run are incredibly helpful and work. Still, there's work to be done because there are so many people who are still living in poverty because of the challenges that they would face naturally. People face disability, they face loss of work, they face dislocation. The challenges that people face in their lives through the course of their lives. But also, to compound that is the problem with wages. To address that, we know that we've made progress, we need to make more. The minimum wage was increased in Massachusetts. That was something that was called for in the report, to $15 an hour over time, which is a great step forward. As well, the earned income tax credit in Massachusetts was, over the past 3 years, has doubled. And that also is extremely helpful because our goal is to make the economy work for everyone and to make work pay in the end. So we're really pleased with this, the way the report turned out. When we spoke last, we were getting ready for a series of forums based on this report. We've actually conducted 3, one in Boston, one in Quincy, and one in Lawrence. We're going to have 3 more in Worcester, in the Pioneer Valley, in Springfield, and then in Western Mass, to continue the conversation. We think it's incumbent on us as the federally mandated anti-poverty agencies. There are 23 across the state, serving every city and town, serving about 600,000 people. We feel it's incumbent on us to continue to raise awareness, to continue to have this critical conversation about poverty, especially now, in light of the context, and part of the context is the federal context. There was a large tax cut. That's putting pressure on the budget because it's going to produce a deficit. When that happens, usually domestic programs, discretionary programs, human service programs take a hit.
By the way, what we're seeing in the short term with that tax cut is that more people are getting hired, and more of them are people with low skills, not much education. It looks like a gain, at least in the short term.
Well, economists will say that there is a short-term gain. The concern is that the benefits, in large part, are going to corporations, but not necessarily to workers. What we want to see in Massachusetts and in other parts of the country is the strong connections between industry, private sector, businesses, and the people that we serve in terms of the skills that those businesses need. And that's sort of the missing link in this story. And so we hope that the benefits of the tax cut could have been, it wasn't designed to accrue to everybody, and we're hoping that we can have some effect on that, but it wasn't designed to accrue to everybody. It will produce a deficit, which we're concerned about. And we're concerned about the proposal, at least on the part of the Trump administration, for the FY19 budget to reduce significantly or eliminate the programs that we run. So that's sort of context for this report too, because of the threats we see on the federal level, and the importance of talking about poverty, because even though the Trump administration has said the war on poverty is won, it hasn't been. We need to work very hard. We need to continue to work very hard together to talk about inequality, because inequality is actually getting worse.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Joe Diamond from MASSCAP. Joe, one thing that probably hasn't changed much, even with the past political changes here, the past couple of years, is that workers they still have to contend with globalization, driving down wages. They still have to contend with technology. I mean, how do you help them close the gap? Get more knowledge and higher skilled jobs.
Well, that actually was a focus, the primary focus of one of our forums. That's what's so interesting and a very nice feature of these forums, that each one has developed a particular focus based on the local personality, if you will. And in Quincy, the focus was exactly that. How do we continue to improve opportunities for low-skilled workers in a variety of industries, the families that we serve, and we invited people from the Workforce Investment Boards, people from the local hospital, the person who runs the Chamber of Commerce, to have a discussion about what's necessary in terms of making stronger connection, making a real connection, really sorting out what is the kind of training that's really important, what are the kind of supports that are really important for the people that we serve. And so those connections, those intentional activities are what we see as a way of making sure that we understand what industry needs and that we can kind of translate that into kind of training that we can give to the people that we serve.
Yeah. Another federal barrier that's come up is the possibility of disincentivizing the use of federal benefits by immigrants. It could be health care for kids, I mean, what about the effect that might have?
You mean the effect of the public charge?
In other words, yes, yeah. In other words, you can't get a green card if your kids are being, using Medicaid.
The sort of the environment that creates, the environment that the executive order to impose work requirements of a whole slew of public benefit programs, together that has the effect of, in the case of immigrants, real concerns in terms of accessing assistance. People who are here legally and who are heading toward citizenship. And so that has to say the least, a dampening effect on it. But the overall effect is a chilling one, because it discourages people from seeking benefits, which can be enormously helpful, and which this report proves. Over 900,000 people have been helped by these programs. So the answer for us is to improve them and to underwrite them.
Here in Massachusetts, another barrier is the cost of housing. In the city here, at least, there's been a lot more housing supply recently, but if you look at the larger picture beyond Boston, where a lot of people have to be forced to move, what about that?
We're part of a larger coalition, the Building Blocks Coalition, for example, and one of the primary goals, I think, for any of us who worry about housing and housing stability is the creation of more affordable housing. So that's a primary goal. The other is keeping rents reasonable, and again, creating more affordable housing would have that effect. About a quarter of the people in this state pay close to half or more than half of their incomes in rent. And there are some parts of the state where, and in fact, if you're low income, you're probably paying half of the people that we serve pay half of their income in rent. So it is a big challenge. This year, there was progress in the budget in terms of support for housing programs, but the primary goal is more affordable housing.
Well, as the report reminded us, there are racial gaps in family income, but they're not nearly as large as the gap in wealth. Why is the gap in wealth so disturbing?
Because from a historical perspective, as the wealth gap widens, societies become weaker on a variety of levels. It's sort of incumbent on us, and it behooves us to provide these programs from a cultural, economic, social perspective. But also, if you take a step back, from in some sense, a self-interested perspective. If the economy isn't working for everyone, eventually, people who continue to lack the ability to remain stable, the ability to keep themselves healthy, the ability to stay in their homes, eventually, the spending that's so important to drive the economy slows. And so it really is an economic argument that inequality itself weakens our society, weakens our economy. So we're all part of this, and to work together and do this right, to help people get on their feet, to become stable and economically mobile, makes sense for everyone from an economic perspective.
Finally, Joe, I know this report's online, so if people want to see this in more detail, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can go to www.masscap.org. The report's there along with an executive summary. And by the way, the report was underwritten in Boston by the Boston Foundation and a variety of other, and the United Way of Mass Bay and Merrimack Valley, and a variety of other private funders from across the state.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Joe Diamond.